these BMPs for management and rehabilitation of riparian reserve was actually developed by a consultant. So the status of this document now is awaiting endorsement by the RSPO BHCV working group. So this document have not been shared publicly. It hasn't gone through any public consultation. There's no need to go through public consultation. And hopefully by June, we will get the BHCV working group to endorse this guidance document. So why this guidance was developed? So this guidance was developed because in RSPO PNC, there's actually a requirement where growers are required to protect water courses and wetlands, including and maintaining and restoring appropriate riparian and other buffer zones. So this requirement is actually found in Principle 4. So this manual will actually provide guidance on how to manage riparian reserve within oil palm plantation in order to comply with the RSPO PNC. So in countries where there's absence of national guidelines, the companies will need to follow this guidelines document. So this is the content of the management guidelines document. So it has 5 important sections. So I'm going to highlight to you what are the important sections of these riparian management guidelines. So it has a section on introduction, layout and design, establishing riparian reserve in new oil palm development, establishing riparian reserve in existing oil palm plantation or new development on degraded land, and lastly, monitoring of riparian reserves and responding to threats. So the introduction of this document highlights, provide you the definition of what riparian is, which is land that located next to natural lakes, as well as streams and rivers. And most of the times in oil palm plantation, it is streams and rivers that are found. And this document also provide highlight in introduction section. It highlights the main environmental benefits of riparian areas, such as water quality protection, bank stabilization, and flood protection, carbon storage and sequestration, and biodiversity conservation. So when it comes to the minimum riparian width, so this guidance here is also found in our RSPO PNC. So if you look at the RSPO PNC standards document at the last section, where the annexes are, so this is the recommendation for river width, minimum width for riparian reserve on each bank. So, for example, for a river that's between 1 to 5 meters, you need to have 5 meters of riparian reserve on each bank. Ada di dalam RSPO PNC.
This is the RSPO standard, but based on Indonesia regulation, it is different. So how then we believe the HEV assessor recommendation? Because, for example, during the witness by ASI, we found that the recommendation by HEV assessor, it is saying about 15 meters. But the regulation stated 50 meters. And then our expert saying that this is non-conformity. And the SI also asked us, do you make it NCR? Yes. Yeah, because the regulation is top of the top. And then the client objection, because we already pay HEV assessor very expensive and that is still non-conform. How come with this?
Yeah, Like I said just now, this guidance is for countries that do not have a national specification. Yeah. Yeah. Jadi di Indonesia, you use the Indonesian guidelines, the law, the national.
But the all HPSSR come with this standard.
Yes.
Yeah, they apply it in Indonesia.
Yeah.
The HPSSR in Indonesia, they apply this regulation, this standard. That's why we issue the non-conformity. Let's saying that the company make the riparian reserve 15 kilometer instead of 50. 15, yeah, 15. 50. Yeah, yeah. We found it in most the HPSSR put it the standard like this one, below 50. 50, yeah.
For what river size?
Usually in Indonesia saying that below. Sorry, I forget, but there's a certain width, it's about, there's a small river and a big river. If it is a small river, should be reserved for 50 meters. Berapa? Enggak, kalau yang kecil berapa? Yang harus
Maybe we can discuss this separately. Yeah. Jadi, like I said just now, for countries that do not have a specific national guidance for riparian areas, they can follow this guidance document. So this document also actually tells you how to determine river width. So how do you actually measures the riparian reserve, which is, if you look at this diagram, the highest point the water reaches in average before it flooded into the surrounding, that is when when you start measure the riparian area. So from here to here, depending on the width of your river, so you will need to actually assign riparian buffer based on the width of the river.
Saying that you're based on the highest level point before the flooding. How do we define that highest point level before flooding that the planter has to do?
How do you define? Oh, sorry. So.
Now, there are three things you look at. When you determine the highest level point, are we looking at the qualitative value or a quantitative value?
Okay.
Please ask for the team to go and define this clearly on a high water level.
High water level just before flooding.
Yes, exactly. How do you determine that? Is it qualitative or quantitative?
They did not explain how they actually do that.
Yeah, they have to.
But this is the recommended method to actually measure the.
Now, for me as an auditor, what I'm going to audit? That this is actually the correct distance for the river to start the riparian zone from that point. How do I audit it as an auditor? I really don't know how to do it unless there's a qualitative and quantitative data for me to look at it, you see.
You see, when you go to the field, rivers actually go up and down, right? And you will know that which are the areas where the water actually reaches right before flooding, because you can see whether from the banks and then from the vegetation that you have on the river banks. So as an auditor, do you go to measure? Do you take a measurement tape with you and?
A kind of infrared indicator, but then nobody carries that around, you see. It is only depending on visual inspections by means of experience in terms of your distances. If you are not an analytical person, you actually not be able to determine the width of the river at all, see. Not easy.
Yes, of course. Not everyone will be able to actually determine, yeah.
Now, if you go back to the slides again, on the distance of the locations of the river, what about anything of those water catchment areas? What is the distance are we going to define? That has to be also clearly stated down to avoid any ambiguous issues, because we do not define that. Most of you say 20 meters is sufficient. I say, are you sure?
Yeah, we will take note of your recommendation, and I will bring this back to the working group. Thank you. So sorry, the upper part is missing. So this document also provide guidance on how to establish riparian areas on new oil palm plantation. So the general environmental rule is that it's always easier, cheaper, and more effective to maintain existing habitats or species than to restore habitats or introduce species. That is why it is very important before a new development takes place, all these riparian areas are actually identified. So, and should not be cleared. So the key environmental management priority includes marking the boundaries of such riparian areas to prevent accidental encroachment during clearing of this area. Carrying out regular monitoring activities in riparian reserves to ensure that threats were detected quickly and management practices adjusted accordingly. And protecting riparian areas from threats which could cause environmental degradation, including hunting, fires, and encroachment from human. So another section that is provided in this document is establishing riparian reserves in existing oil palm plantation and or degraded land. So there are two main approaches towards riparian reserves restoration. So you either leave the area to regrow naturally and undertaking activities which increase seeding growth and also removing weeds within one circle around each seedling. For this option, it will only be successful if the area has adequate supplies of seeds nearby. The second approach is planting trees, usually seedlings of approximately 40 to 60 centimeter tall, using native species, selected based on their ability to tolerate the site condition, because usually when you establish riparian areas in existing plantation, the site is already not natural. It is why you have to pick a species that can tolerate the altered site condition. And then the seedlings can be planted at a distance of 3 to 5 meters with more than 10 species. So the steps involved in establishing riparian areas is first, you identify which waterways require riparian reserves, and then clearly indicate the location of this reserve on the ground and on relevant estate maps. And then you assess the current status of reserve habitats. So once this area have been identified, you have to actually assess the status, whether the riparians are actually still in good condition or it is already very poor conditions, and you have to select a few sites to actually make comparison. And then you develop a management plan based on the key management priorities, whether you want to actually use it for, you have to maintain the area because the communities are using the areas nearby to meet their basic needs such as fishing, or the riparian areas is actually important for important species that are found in the area, or whether the riparian areas are actually connecting to very important landscape nearby. So you have to develop management plan based on why you want to and how you want to manage the area. And then if the reserve is actually if the riparian reserve is established for natural vegetation and wildlife, a survey for threats need to be undertaken and identified and minimized to prevent further degradation. Then in degraded reserve areas, the manager will need to design and implement restoration program. And then after that, they carry out regular monitoring to detect threats and to assess reserve status. And then lastly, review monitoring results and adjust practices in response to these results. So these are the very quick steps involved in establishing riparian reserves. So this document also provide guidance whether a site should be left for natural regeneration or active replanting is required. So for example, if natural vegetation cover is high or seed dispersers is present, soil disturbance is low, timescale for vegetation recovery is low and resource available is low, then you opt for natural regeneration, assisted natural regeneration. So if natural vegetation cover is low, then this seed disperser is absent, soil disturbance is high, timescale for vegetation recovery is medium to rapid, resource available is medium to high, then it's recommended for replanting. So this guidance also provide a simplified decision, which is actually extracted from ZXL on how to choose restoration strategy for degraded riparian reserve habitats. So the first box is there existing vegetation at the site? So yes or no. So if yes, you move to the left bottom table that will ask for has all palm already been planted. Then yes or no, and then you move on to the next box. So this is a diagram, a flowchart that tells you how to choose a restoration strategy for degraded riparian reserve habitat. And then this is an example of natural regeneration in Sumatra, where the oil palms are not being maintained when there's no activities such as fertilizer and chemical application. And this is an example of native tree seedlings planted in riparian areas. They're about 3 to 5 years old in Sumatra as well. So the last section of this guidance document is on monitoring riparian reserve and responding to threats. So irregardless of whether the riparian areas is intact with natural vegetation or they're undergoing restoration, monitoring is very important. So riparian areas should be monitored regularly in order to record any threats to the riparian reserve, to assess whether riparian reserves were being managed as described in the management plans, and to assess whether the current management practices were effective for maintaining or restoring the riparian areas and their associated waterways. So the benefits of regular monitoring of riparian reserve is provides evidence for auditors to check if oil palms plantation were compliant to the RSPO-P&C. Frequent monitoring will ensure that threats were detected early to be dealt with timely before significant damage occur. Restoration outcomes would vary between regions with different environmental and social contexts, and it is important to track the progress of riparian reserve restoration to ensure that the time, money, and land area invested were used effectively. So, what are the examples of monitoring activities of riparian reserves? So, the guidance actually outlined monitoring activities for boundaries, to assess threats, and then monitoring activities for vegetation in newly restored riparian reserve, vegetation in existing riparian reserve, water and biodiversity. So it also, for managing threats, threats such as human encroachment, wildlife protection and fire are being managed. And then this data, monitoring data that have been collected during the monitoring activity exercise is important to improve to improve management protocols of the company. So these are the example of monitoring activities that can be undertaken in riparian reserve.
There are several things have been, just an example, been put out into these monitoring examples. My concern here now is that what sort of parameters are we going to look at in this monitoring of the threats? Example, in the water, what sort of parameters are we looking at? Biodiversity, what sort of parameters are we looking at? That is actually very important, actually, you see.
Like, for example, water, total suspended solids, pH. It is actually described in the guidance document. In terms of biodiversity, you'll be looking at what kind of animals that actually uses this area by installing camera traps, or by looking at the tracks that have been left behind by the wildlife. So these monitoring activities actually involve like patrolling when it comes to biodiversity. These areas will need to be visited at least 3 times a year based on the recommendation of these guidelines. So here is an example of pictures of a pale-tailed macaques crossing a river in Sabah. So as you can see that these are the riparian areas with, they call it breach, that actually help this animal to move around. Yes?
Thank you. I actually have 2 questions, but would you mind to go back to the slide that again, this one. Well, I'm not paying, to be honest, I'm not paying attention to the introductory part. My first question is, will there be any stakeholder consultation for this guidance? Because when I did an audit, sometimes the riparian area has already been cleared, and then the company quickly tried to restore the area, but they did some sort of cover crop species, for example, like mucuna. the end result is good for the eyes, so everything is green, but actually this is like calm before the storm, because once the cover crop covers all the riparian area, it will reach its climax stage, and there will be no way of planting trees there, or if there is a way, it will be really, really expensive. And the way that this graph is done is saying whether there is some clan covered in the area or bare soil. And somehow it doesn't say whether the plant is invasive or not or something like that, which is supposed to be what needs to be paid what needs to be concerned by the company. What I'm saying is that if there is a stakeholder consultation for these guidelines, then maybe there is a better way of providing a restoration program that can be derived from the input of the stakeholders, especially those that are familiar with the conservation and restoration project. That would be my first question. And the second question is whether if the company does not follow this guidance, would we need to raise some sort of non-conformances? Okay, that's the two questions that I would like to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you very much for your question. The first question is there will be, about public consultation. There will be no public consultation for this document because it is a guidelines document. So it will be treated as the peat BMPs that we have. I don't know how many of you are aware of the peat management guidelines. So it is just a guidelines for companies that do not have information or do not have specific guidelines in place to maintain these areas. So it is not compulsory. The second question is about your concern with how well they are actually managing this area, which is not up to standards. No, this is not a compulsory guidance document. It is a BMPs that for companies that do not have anything on how to manage this area.
In response to your question or your remark, I would assume that in a case like this, essentially you would have to refer back to any national or local legislation on the matter, regardless of the existence of this guideline or not.
Well, for example, like this, maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but for example, in Indonesia, oil palm plantation after certain sizes would require to have ownership title, yeah, and then based on there is no regulation that says, okay, if you have an area that is a stream or something like that, you have to restore it. There's no regulation regarding that. Once the land title has been granted, they can convert all the area into plantation.
Indonesia has a very strict law when it comes to riparian areas. Yeah, Indonesia has the law for riparian guidelines. I mean, titled land, as you mean if that land is given for you to develop, you can develop up to the riparian?
Yeah. It depends on the what authority issuing a land title for you. Like there's a different authority, right? Like forestry is a straightforward. You need to maintain the riparian. But let's say like National Land Agency, so there is no regulation about that. So once you issue land title, so you can, whatever you can do it.
So you're saying that there's no Indonesian law for riparian areas in Indonesian plantation?
There is, but not applicable for all.
Yeah, but we're talking about oil palm. Is it applicable to oil palm?
Not all oil palm status. You know what I mean? So sometimes, like previously, it's a natural forest converted into oil palm. There will be applicable. But if the previous status land is not a forest, so it's not applicable or something like that.
So, is it that complex? So that means Pak Yo betul? No, Pak Yo said no. Pak Yo is... Pak Yo, can you help comment with the law?
Okay, this Indonesian context, but the explanation since everyone is for the countries without any regulation. For Indonesian context, actually, there's several mechanism. Yeah, there's several regulations which address the issue of riparians. Each is in national level, there's a law regarding land use. It should be addressed, and also there's a CAPRES. There's also regulation about the environment. So there's several laws, not only one. And if you audit in Indonesia, then you must check which law is applicable, which is not. So please not following only one law. Yeah, I understand in the previous development of plantation, they ignore if there is riparian. But if you see some new development actually after the CAPRES, yeah, CAPRES 1990 is there's some guidance regarding conservation. Yeah, CAPRES is not only for, let's say, for forestry sector. Is CAPRES is presidential decree. Yeah, so sometimes the people looks in the different regulation, and after CAPRES actually there's a land use for tata ruang. It's also there's some portions talking about the conservation issues there.
In summary,
there is
law.
But this done following. If you see in one particular, you must look at different law and regulation in it, like a forest sectors.
Like CAPRES 1992 presidential decree. Actually, it's the CAPRES is issued for the local government to determine the riparian area, not for the industry actually, right? So that's why it's still debating. You know, so some people say we refer to this CAPRES. Some people say no, that CAPRES refer to for the governments, not for the industry. So when the government issued the land title for us, without any note or whatever, so we can do whatever we want, something like that. So sometimes different regulation, different reference, we're still debating. That's what I'm talking about.
So anyway, for the sake of my questions, so the answer is clear that this guidance does not have to be followed by the certificate holder, and then okay, that's fine.
If you want a guidance, you want to know how to manage or establish a riparian areas because you don't have internally, you don't have SOP for that, then you can use this as a guidelines. This is guidelines. Any more questions?
Hello, Des. Based on that discussion, I think RSPO should have the workshop for ACV assessor to ensure that the standard used for riparian should be same all for the approved HEV SSR. And also have the reference from the Indonesia government, because many interpretation can be conducted by the HEV SSR. Looks like sometimes HEV SSR trying to save the land of the company, so make it shorter. But the technical experts saying it should be more than that. Yeah. Then my suggestion is RSPO should evaluate the HEV SSR, make them the same perception, and also refer to the government, even Malaysia, even Indonesia, and other countries. Okay. So there is no debate between CB, clients, company, and the HEV SSR.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the Jarangan NKT is actually having a revision, revising the toolkit now. So yeah, we can actually have them to look at the HCV4, which is riparian reserve. So are there any more questions?
Did the guidance recommend on what to do with the palms that are already planted in the riparian? Do they recommend us to remove them so that the natural...
Yes, there is a case studies in the riparian management guidelines. I think the case is Musim Mas. So it did provide what to do if you actually have planted on the riparian areas.
So what do they recommend? Poisoning or removal by chopping down, or what did they say?
If I'm not mistaken, this picture that I've shown you just now that actually have fronds that actually dying in the palm oil, the riparian areas, that is the Musim Mas case studies. They are actually leaving the area for natural regeneration without killing the palm or poisoning the palm. They don't even maintain, they don't fertilize, they don't put agrochemicals, they just let it go.
But then the natural one won't come up if there's no sunlight. So there's this question about whether, allowing, removal, and did the recommendation, did they say anything how it needs to be removed? Can we use poison,
It is in the riparian zone, so all agrochemical activities were not allowed at the area. So that means there's no poisoning of the palms. But there are a few case studies.
And during a replanting, those palms along the riparian are not supposed to be...
If it's during replanting, then it's different because you'll be all the palms will be actually removed and for replanting, right? So there are actually steps where you will need to stabilize the soil and removing everything manually. So there are also sections on replanting.
So did they recommend to remove or maintain? Just leave the palms along the streams and rivers?
Okay, during replanting, if you look at the PNC, you will actually need to, there are two options. You see, when you have planted on riparian areas based on the NI, there's one requirement that says during replanting, you have to make sure that all these riparian buffers are actually kept, set aside, right? And there are companies that actually don't wait until replanting. They already started doing it, which is they allow their plants to die without any management. So yeah, sorry, we're running out of time. So if there's no more questions, we wrap up the session. Can I deal with your question later? It is just the guidelines. So, you want to answer?
Yes.
So we are running out of time. Thank you for your attention. So if you have any question, you can always come back to me. All the recommendations that have been received during this session, I'll bring it to the RSPO BHCV working group and also the Jaringan NKT. Thank you.